Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Deep Dive on Climate Reporting. This is our 49th deep dive, and we can't believe we started this during COVID as a way to communicate with the larger climate community. We can't believe we've gotten this far. I'm Margaret Holm. I'm a board member with First Things First Okanagan. We're a nonprofit volunteer climate organization, and I'm joined tonight by fellow board members Lori Goldman, who is manning the Zoom controls, and Sue Kirschman, who will be introducing tonight's speaker. Deep Dive is a monthly online webinar where we explore climate issues and we look for climate solutions for our communities. We come to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Syilx and the Similkameen nations. And each month we try and feature an event that's happening, an opportunity for cultural learning and coming together. And we have a perfect event coming up this Friday and Saturday. Everyone is welcome to join the Tamkin Community Gardens celebrating nation-to-nation gathering. It's the second anniversary of this very important project, which is about food sustainability, First Nations traditional foods, and also learning to garden and learning to cope with climate in the Similkameen. So it's a 2-day event in Coston and Oliver, and it brings together people to share, learn, connect, eat good food. There'll be performances and talks, live music, and meals, and it's free for everyone. It's a real family event. It's outdoors, all ages friendly, and dinner is provided Friday and lunch on Saturday. So if you're interested, Lori's got out a notice about day one, which will take place between 1 and 7 in Coston at the Netamkin Community Gardens, and day 2 is at the Osuyas Band Office from 9 till 12. So I really encourage everyone to try and make it there for even for an hour or so to see what the Similkameen and Osuyas communities are doing in terms of food sustainability. I'll hand things over now to Sue to introduce tonight's speaker.
Thank you, Margaret, and hello, everybody. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, just a couple of reminders. Please turn your mic off so that we don't have any background noise. And during the talk, if you think of a question, please type it into the chat. We'll have a Q&A afterwards, and we'll be posing your questions then. And as always, we will send out a video recording of tonight's talk. It will also be posted on our YouTube channel, so you can forward it to other people or look at it again if you want. And we will include any links to interesting points that come up. So don't worry about taking any notes, just sit back and enjoy the talk. Our guest speaker tonight is Jaclyn Whittal, and Jaclyn is the founder and CEO of One Earth Communications, with nearly 20 years of experience working with climate science, extreme weather, and public trust. Jaclyn brings a distinctive combination of scientific expertise, frontline reporting, and high-level communication strategies. Jaclyn is a trained meteorologist, and she's built a high-profile journalism career, translating complex data into clear, actionable insights, all during high-impact events. Her experience spans reporting on tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfires, floods, and blizzards all around the world, and has shaped her ability to communicate risk with clarity, credibility, and composure under pressure. Her work has appeared on major global platforms, including CNN, the Weather Channel, National Geographic, and Smithsonian. We're really excited to have you here tonight, Jaclyn, so a big welcome, and I will turn things over to you now.
Thank you so much, Sue, and thank you everybody thank you for the applause. Yeah, and thanks for everyone joining in. I actually live in Vernon, BC, so I'm going to say officially a local now. I've been here 6 years, moved here from Ontario, and really, really happy to be here tonight. And hopefully you'll find the talk interesting. I think it's going to be unique, that's for sure. Lots of some good visuals and lots to get into. So let's begin. So I'll share my screen here and you guys tell me if it all is coming through. Does that look okay there for everyone? Yeah? Okay. I'm going to assume that's all good. Okay, so a little bit of background. I will talk about what I do, but we'll just kind of we'll just go for it. So you may have seen me here in Canada on TV because I've been with the Weather Network as a meteorologist on air for the last 13 years, and before that, I was with Global TV in Toronto and in Regina, Saskatchewan. So I've had the opportunity to talk about daily weather events and your local weather forecasts to some of the biggest weather events across North America. And it was really throughout my career during that coverage that I guess, changed me in a way. I went from a bit of an adrenaline seeker and a storm chaser, someone on television covering weather to someone that experienced a lot of changes in our weather. And even in my career over nearly 2 decades, I've seen the changes in our weather. And that really kind of fueled my interest in climate and sort of joining the climate movement, if you will. So I made that shift, I would say, relatively recently, maybe about 5 years ago. So talking about climate when weather is already talking back. So I'm going to kind of share in tonight's presentation what works for me as far as communicating climate, some of the influence of climate on our weather patterns, not just in BC, but around the world. And, we're going to talk about teleconnections like El Nino and all of these buzzwords that we hear, but what does it really mean and how do we communicate it best? So I'll do my best to make it digestible. But let's start with sort of what started out as my day job. So I'll just play a clip here. I happen to be talking about US weather here on set. Normally I talked about Canadian weather, but here, have a look. This is kind of what I used to do on TV for many years.
Let's talk a little bit about its position right now on the morning satellite and radar. You can see some heavy bands of snow through areas like Rapid City, South Dakota, and really through Minot, Bismarck. And then along the warm front, that's where we're tracking some rain. But this whole area out ahead of the cold front as we go on through the afternoon is going to fill in with severe thunderstorms. There's a marginal threat for storms. Don't be shocked if that gets upgraded throughout the day. So keep it here all afternoon at theweathernetwork.com, or if you're watching us on your smartphone. So winds gusting over 50 miles per hour, blowing.
So you get the idea there. That was my day job. And what my day job really allowed me to do was to get out in the field and experience Mother Nature at her worst. And as a communicator of weather and ultimately climate, it was imperative that I did the work I did in the field because it really taught me about how these storms operate. And that could be tropical weather, that could be severe weather like thunderstorms, or winter weather, or heat, or wildfires. And so by being up and close and personal with Mother Nature, it really allowed me to better communicate the risk to viewers and to the public and gain that public trust. So you can see me out there doing, yes, that was in a hurricane in the white jacket, and then me out in front of a tornado. Most of those photos, I think, were my time at the Weather Network. So I learned weather first as adrenaline out in the field and then as evidence. And I say that because I started storm chasing in 2011. I was working for Global Regina at the time, and a local photographer said, "Hey, do you want to join me down in Tornado Alley? I'm going to go take some photos of tornadoes." And I'm just like, okay, I've never thought of doing this, but sure, why not? And so off I went, and my news director at the time at Global Regina thought it was a good idea that we would brand me as, at the time, a weather anchor. I wasn't a meteorologist yet, as sort of branding me as the trusted voice, so that when I came back to Regina for our severe season in the summer, that, I would have a bit of street cred, if you will, if I had already been chasing storms in Tornado Alley. So that's when it all began. And when I went with that photographer, who is a well-known storm chaser, his name is Greg Johnson. You may have heard of him. He goes by Tornado Hunter, and he had a show on CMT here in Canada for a few years, I think. We went down there, and what I didn't realize is that I was really being introduced to what would be a new passion for many years. And so I've been chasing since 2011. And then I became a meteorologist. I finished my schooling. I was doing a certificate program, an operational meteorology program with Mississippi State University. And I finished that, and then I started doing work on television with a lot more field work happening, and a lot more storm chasing. And then that led me to doing work with Global Toronto, and then ultimately the Weather Network, where I really kind of hung my hat and did a lot of different weather events. And then that led to about 5 years ago, really focusing on climate journalism. So I got to kind of cherry pick some of the stories that I wanted to tell, and they're important stories to tell. And how can we link climate to extreme weather? Because we can't link every weather event to climate. That's not how it works. So I learned a lot, but a couple of highlights. Let's go back to some of my chasing days, because people usually find this stuff pretty fascinating. But what I'm looking at is, okay, yes, there's a tornado here, but this is just such a small part of the overall thunderstorm. You can see the tornado there, and I'm going to show you. Below it is what we call a debris cloud. You can see something called a collar cloud, and that is all underneath the wall cloud of a thunderstorm that could be as high as 60,000 feet in the atmosphere. So it's a tornado is very tough to actually find. It's like a needle in a haystack when you're out in the Central Plains or in the Canadian prairies. So they're pretty fascinating. So I'll show you this one in Nebraska. Okay, we have a absolutely stunning tornado right in front of us here. This is near Curtis, Nebraska. Wow. Wow, there it is. That is about as beautiful it gets. Beautiful as it gets. I'm hoping it's not doing any damage, but what a shot. Oh. And that tornado actually didn't do any damage, which was the good news. And so when we were chasing storms, we were learning a lot about what they were doing, or why one storm would produce a tornado and maybe why another one wouldn't. We learned about hail, we learned about lightning, and all these neat little things that happen with thunderstorms. Like lightning tends to pick up right before a storm produces a tornado. And I don't know the answer as to why that is, but just interesting things that you would learn out in the field. But we always hoped that a tornado would not be doing any damage. Sadly, I was a part of a lot of coverage of storms that did do a lot of damage. But on that note, we can't link tornadoes to climate. We know that. There is not enough data to support whether or not we're going to see more tornadoes, or if they're linked to a warming planet. We are seeing the risk of hail becoming more possible in future, because there's more moisture in the atmosphere. Warmer air can hold more moisture. So we know that. We know tropical storms like hurricanes can be linked to climate change, but not tornadoes. But let's just slow it down a little bit and talk about weather and climate, because maybe not everybody thinks of them as two separate things, and they very much are. What is it? Weather is the mood. So, climate is your whole personality, and weather is very moody, right? We look out our window one minute and it's sunny, and then the next hour it could be a thunderstorm, or it could be hailing. Or climate is really a long-term type of scenario. The range of conditions and extremes that are looked at over 50 to 100 years. Maybe some of you folks know this, but a lot of people think they're one and the same. Weather is short term, the storm, the partly cloudy conditions that you're getting outside your window. A single weather event is not the same thing as climate change, nor can we point out our window and say, oh, that's climate change. No, we actually can't do that. We would have to look at a long span of time and say, okay, is this winter weather that we've been seeing in Ontario this past season, can we link that to climate change? That's something called attribution science. And there's climatologists that link, the odds. What are our odds for, with a warming world, that we could see more of XYZ weather events? So there are professionals that do that. But weather, hours to days, climate, much longer period. Now, climate change, though, can shift in the background those conditions that could make things more likely or more intense. And we're going to hit on that a little bit more. Now, as a communicator, as a journalist, as an on-air meteorologist, and really for anyone, I think this is a useful breakdown. A useful climate story has 3 layers. So in my case, as a storm chaser, I had that felt reality. I saw what was happening underneath the thunderstorm or in the hurricane, or maybe I was in the wildfire and I was breathing in those smoky conditions. People have that felt reality as well. But then we need the science and the context. So how the warming changed the odds for that particular event. So that's important. We can never lose sight of that because, as I mentioned, you can't just blame everything on climate change. And then the practical agency. So, what decisions are available to us? So, what can we do to help mitigate risk with these extreme weather events moving forward? So, I always think of that felt reality, science context, and practical agency. And I think if you can always remember those three things, then we can do a better job at communicating. But I mentioned a little bit about attribution science, and I had a chance 2 hurricane seasons ago in 2024 to put together a piece that I'd be happy to share with all of you if interested. It's a 20-minute piece. I shot, edited, produced all of it myself. I went down to Florida with my camera, and it was a project I kind of did on my own. And I talked to people about climate attribution and how we're linking climate change to tropical weather and hurricanes. And so here's a bit of a teaser, but it's called Things Are Changing, and I can send you the link to the YouTube piece, but here's a quick snippet of it.
Climate change played a role that led to the explosive rapid intensification.
The climate is evolving at such a pace that we are not even able to keep up.
The intensity, the monster nature of these storms is indeed man-made.
Yeah, I'm 6th generation Floridian. My wife, both of us are, and we don't want to live here anymore now. You know,
people are getting tired of having to run from the threats, of having to run from these absolutely turbocharged disasters. It doesn't mean that we've never had hurricanes. It means, or storm surges. It means that we have the fossil fuel companies have turbocharged these hurricanes, making them into monster hurricanes.
Okay, so if anyone doesn't know who that woman was, I'm very proud to say that I actually call her a friend, and that's Christiana Figueres, who was the executive secretary of the UNFCCC in 2015 when the Paris Accord was founded. So she was actually the person that negotiated the Paris Agreement. And I met her through another connection, and I was lucky to interview her there for that piece and meet her a couple times in person. But so she's allowed to blame the fossil fuel companies with that kind of intent and anger, obviously, with good reason. And so, we talk about these supercharged hurricanes, and we are seeing more of that. And it's not just tropical weather. One of the, I guess, awakenings I had as a storm chaser, as a meteorologist, was that every time I would go on a plane and I would go cover a storm in Florida or in Texas or wherever, or even locally in Canada somewhere, I would get on that plane and I would come back home to my little safe haven in Ontario, Canada. And, I always felt horrible leaving the scene of a disaster or whatever, but I was safe myself. I left, I went back to my normal life. And I didn't realize how lucky I was to have that luxury until I moved to British Columbia in 2020, and climate fueled extreme weather events were happening now in my own backyard. And the photo you're looking at is, of course, the atmospheric river event in 2021. I took that on a hill in Merritt, and that was the flooding that I was covering in Merritt, BC. And of course, there was a confluence of both rivers there that flooded a waste treatment plant. So it was a terrible situation, and people were not used to seeing this, let alone all the other things that happened with that event, which we'll talk about momentarily. But it really changed me. And I think it was that time that I said, I need to use my voice. I had millions of people on the Weather Network that would tune in to watch what I was doing, whether it was covering a storm or giving a forecast. I need to use that voice and that reach to tell important stories like climate stories. So that's what I did. 2021 made climate local before many people had language for it. Off air, Lori and I were talking about, of course, the big heat dome event, which is the same year. So the heat event in 2021 happened in June. Linked to 619 heat-related deaths. I covered that extensively in the interior, not in the interior, rather, on the coast. I was in Abbotsford. I was dealing with the vulnerable population, like the homeless in, East Vancouver. And it was just awful. There were so many firsts with that. I remember walking along the shores of Third Beach, um, and I guess in Stanley Park it is. And I'm not that familiar, but I remember walking along that one of the days of the heat dome, and there was this awful smell. And I didn't know what it was because I'd never really spent much time there. And I realized later, after speaking to someone, that that was actually all of the critters and creatures and the ecosystem, all of these um, fish and clams and all these things that were rotting on the beaches because of this extreme heat. Lytton, BC, of course we know this, didn't just break the record once, but 3 days in a row, the all-time Canadian heat record, daily heat record, 49.6. Like, it didn't just beat it by a little bit, it beat it by a lot. And then of course we know about the wildfire that happened on the third day through Lytton. I mean, these are big things that all happened in one year. And it's, when we think about the Okanagan, we're all used to heat. We all have air conditioning, but so many people on the coast don't. And it was the elderly, it was the most vulnerable population. And even some of the people that did have the means, to have an air conditioning, maybe just didn't because you didn't need one before. And this new normal shows up first as more hot days and hotter nights. And I want to drill this point home because we're used to about in Kelowna, this comes from the Climate Atlas of Canada, Kelowna historically averages about 24 days per year above 30 degrees. Okay, usually as Canadians, we're pretty happy about that. We like the heat, at least I do. But projections show as climate change, is in place for the next many years. I mean, look at these numbers. It goes up to 41 and then 60 and then even higher than that. So how do we deal with that? All of a sudden, it's not a beautiful day on the beach or out on a boat or whatever. It's a health risk. And then we talk about overnight lows that we can't cool our bodies, especially for folks that maybe don't have air conditioning, and you just can't cool down. So it's scary when we think about that. Going back to the atmospheric river of 2021, I mean, this brought historical amounts of rain, as we know, the flooding in Merritt, but topography played such a role in this. In Hope, 277.5 millimeters, or about almost 11 inches of rain. And remember that number, by the way, because I'm going to talk about a hurricane coming up shortly that will just blow your mind in terms of the amount of rainfall that it dropped. But 11 inches of rain in a short period of time with mountainous terrain spells disaster. And we had that fall, we had early snowfalls. So we had a lot of snow in the mountains, and then you get a warm stream of moisture like an atmospheric river, temperatures are up, and it was just a recipe for disaster. And boy, was it ever. The Coquihalla, our major, Trans-Canada routes were shut down for, I think, until January. And this happened in the fall. So it was a big deal. In the Okanagan, climate risk, as I don't probably need to tell this group, is about water in many cases. And we had a year where snowpack was low here, not everywhere provincially, but that impacts our spring melt. I think I just saw today that there's a water alert already for, yeah, did you see it too, Sue? I see you shaking your head with the Okanagan Nation, I believe it was, that put out a water conservation alert. So already, and what this means is that impacts obviously our lake levels and then irrigation demands for all of our agriculture. And, summer drought, we know all of this spells disaster in terms of water, but also wildfires. And, I'm quite passionate about wildfires because I've covered a lot of them. And, in 2021, once again, that same year, I live at the north end of Okanagan Lake in a community, and we were under evacuation alert here for the White Rock Lake fire that was 90,000 hectares in size. And the amount of smoke, this was my first full summer here. And I mean, it was awful. So back to the communication side of things, I put this in. Do not say climate change caused everything, because it doesn't. But it certainly does load the dice, right? It makes the odds of a lot of events like heat, like flooding, like hurricanes, like wildfires, more likely, more potent, stronger. Fires are burning over winters now. We've got these zombie fires, so we already start the fire season sometimes, without a leg up. Warming changes the background conditions. That's how we want to think about it when it comes to weather. And I also put here, a single event has many ingredients like topography. So, would the atmospheric river event happen if it was flat? Maybe not. Would it, if the Sumas Prairie wasn't the Sumas Prairie, maybe we wouldn't have flooded to that degree. There's all kinds of different variables, but these things are not happening just because of a coincidence. These are happening because we know why. And I think, the way I've always done it, and I'll do it today and do it tonight, is to just be as authentic as I possibly can. The strongest public explanation is honesty, and uncertainty is okay because we live in uncertain times. I think it's okay to say, I don't know, or we don't know yet, but we know there's a lot changing. And that's kind of the theme of that hurricane piece I was talking about earlier. Is things are changing, even if we don't know why or what we want to say about it. Maybe we don't even want to use the words climate change, but things are changing. We can all agree on that. This is a time-lapse video in 2023 that I shot of the Kelowna McDougall Creek wildfire, which was an awful situation, as we all probably remember, and the smoke was awful. On a personal note, my parents had just flown in from Ontario, and they were on their plane, and they looked down and they saw this plume of what they thought it was a big thunderstorm cloud. And I said, no, that's actually a wildfire. And you're seeing the smoke. And then our entire week was, we were smoked out. But I mean, the real victims were the 10,000, more than 10,000 City of West Kelowna residents that were evacuated. And I spent a lot of time in that area, and it was awful to see. It became a local communication story, people helping each other out. I remember, I'm not a big TikTok person. In my day, when I started in news, it was just beginning to, we were looking at Twitter as a medium. Now it's about TikTok and many other platforms, but TikTok, I remember it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was in a Walmart parking lot in West Kelowna, and there were all these campers, and people were on TikTok doing videos of the fire to give messaging to other loved ones through TikTok. And I just thought that was really powerful. Like, these are young people that was how they were communicating to each other. So it tested all of us, including, residents that were watching from afar to see if their house had been burned or not. It was awful to see. And I mentioned the smoke because we all know if we live in the Okanagan, that smoke can get trapped in the valley for weeks on end. I mean, basically smoke is the real thing that we need to worry ourselves about from a human health standpoint. It changes school days, work, tourism, sports, healthcare, mental well-being, and so AQHI, the Air Quality Health Index, is an important one to highlight because that will likely only get worse. Because we've seen it where we have fires from Washington or somewhere else, and it becomes our story here in the Okanagan. Or you think about the fires over the last, I think it was 2 years ago, the fires that were burning in Canada that brought smoke right into my hometown in Ontario, in Windsor, Ontario, Detroit, Michigan. I live right on the border growing up there. They'd never seen wildfire smoke in Detroit, Michigan. New York City couldn't even see across a block because you're so socked in with smoke. So these are trying times, and they're unique times. I want to talk about El Nino because you're going to hear a lot about it. I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to El Nino, but I'll try and clear it up because El Nino is basically the warming of our sea surface temperatures in the South Pacific and the equator, and that can have an impact. Warm ocean currents and warm ocean temperatures can have an impact on our weather patterns every day. But El Nino is a cycle that happens about every 7 years, and it can have a real profound impact on our weather patterns across the globe. And it's not all bad news. Some can be good news. For an area like California that may be dealing with drought for several years, they might get a rainy season because of El Nino. El Nino can tamper with our hurricane risk in the Atlantic. So that's good news. So maybe this hurricane season won't be as active, but always remember it only takes one storm. So, and the other thing about El Nino or La Nina, its counterpart, is that they're never an exact science. They're just kind of a guide. So NOAA, the National Weather Service in the United States, gives an 82% chance of an El Nino this May through July, and a 96% by the winter, so December to February and into next year. So what that means for us in BC, lots of things. It means a hot and dry summer likely to come. It can also mean a dry winter with less snow, which of course we know what that can mean come the following spring when we're looking at the freshet. So these are the things that we look for, these signals, to have an idea of what might be coming up. And here's a map of the world, and you can see it signals wet, sometimes it signals dry, and it's not all bad news. But while here's the bad news, is that as we see a warming globe, we are seeing our weather patterns, separate to our teleconnections, but our weather patterns becoming more extreme. So while someone is getting, like us just this month, a ridge of high pressure bringing 30 degrees in early May, might sound nice, might seem like a good idea, but that's not normal. And so while we're getting that, maybe Eastern Canada is getting a dip in the jet stream, bringing an extreme round of cold. And most of that is weather, that's day in, day out. But the problem is we're seeing these jet stream patterns stalling out. And I'm going to talk about that and a hurricane coming up and how that made for a disastrous situation in 2017. So for BC, I kind of mentioned some of these teleconnections, which are really tendencies, they're not guarantees, but some of the things that we're going to be watching for. Now, the summer fire risk, although an El Nino typically brings a hot and dry summer for us in BC, our summer fire risk really depends, most of you probably know this, but on our spring rain. So if we continue to have active days like we've been seeing recently, that's good. We need the rain. And if we stay a little on the cooler side, or at least seasonal, that's good news. And then, of course, June becomes a big player in terms of rain. If we can get a rainy June, we're in much better shape. So we'll see where that goes. All right, let's transition to hurricanes, because I've covered, I guess, 11, I think, maybe 10. I think it's 11. I've lost count. And this was a storm that I covered. And you can see the eye clearly defined. I'll take you into the center of a hurricane right now. And this was, what was this? 2019 Hurricane Michael in Panama City, Florida. And we are positioned in a parking garage. And the reason we are in a parking garage is because hurricanes have something called a storm surge. And that's where the momentum of the storm over the ocean piles up the water against the coast. And it's not like a tsunami wave. It's like a slow and steady stream of waves and ocean water that gets piled up against the coast. It's called storm surge. It's the most deadly part of a hurricane and the most destructive part. And those storm surges can be, Hurricane Katrina, I think, had a 27-foot storm surge. So when we're chasing a hurricane, we want to make sure that we're above the surge risk so that we don't get flooded out, or our cars are above the surge risk. And also, we're journalists, so we're documenting the storms. So we want to be in the strongest structure that we possibly can find. That's why we choose a parking garage, because it's solid concrete. But there's no guarantees, of course. And I've had some pretty scary incidences. But, oh, wait, I want to see if I can go back. Let's see if I can start that one. Oh, I don't know why let's try that again. Oh, it's not playing for some reason. Okay, let's move ahead. That was some strong winds. You have to trust me that they're really strong winds there. I'm going to take you to 2017, which was Hurricane Harvey. This was in Texas, right along the Gulf Coast, and Houston was majorly impacted. I'll just play it, and you can learn a little bit about this storm.
All right, Port Lavaca, Texas, now being referred to as ground zero, potentially this evening and into Saturday morning as Harvey makes landfall as now the first major hurricane in 12 years for the U.S. Well, from the beginning, I've been watching this storm. This was, one of those things we didn't exactly know what it was going to end up being remembered by. I think I know what it's going to be remembered by: the rain, the flooding. So we left Victoria, Texas, and we're on our way to Houston. Why? Because the greatest flooding threat is in that area. We're under a tornado warning just as we pulled in, so I got to get it to shelter inside the hotel. Where I'm standing is flooded as far as the eye can see. You know that it's not safe to be in the attic of your home. They want you on the roof. I've heard local officials actually telling people to be on the roof. Are you prepared to do that? You can see that the water levels are halfway up the street signs. Look at how high that water is right now. This is the whole city. Everywhere is underwater. It is like nothing I've ever seen before. I don't know how long this is going to go on for. I don't know how long they're going to be cleaning up for. Likely years.
So that storm has now gone down in the record books as the tropical cyclone that has produced the most rainfall in history. So we talked about the atmospheric river event. Remember how much damage that caused in BC. It was 11 inches was the inches measurement. This was 62 inches of rainfall that Harvey produced. And that has absolutely been linked to climate change. Our warmer sea surface temperatures are, as Christiana Figueres said, supercharging these hurricanes. And what happened with Harvey is, I was talking earlier about the jet stream and how when it stalls, things can get stuck. They don't think of the jet stream as like a roller coaster. And so our storm systems just kind of ride along and go around the globe. Well, if a jet stream pattern becomes like an omega block, you've probably heard of that, where it's the omega sign, things can get locked in and get cut off from the overall jet stream flow, and they can park themselves like Hurricane Harvey did in Texas for days. In fact, the hurricane made landfall and it was a Category 4, and that was like the meh, not even a big deal. Didn't really do much damage. It was after that the storm maintained Category 2 strength for a few days, and it stalled over the same area and just kept bringing training thunderstorms off the Gulf of Mexico over Houston and just flooded the area. And that is an example of climate change influencing tropical weather. Like probably look at how many, those are tracks around the world in all the basins of all hurricanes in history. So now imagine that Hurricane Harvey had the most rainfall ever recorded in any tropical cyclone. That's not by coincidence. In 2024, I was down in Florida producing that piece, Things Are Changing, and I spoke to this resident who had just had his home hit by Hurricane Helene, and then Hurricane Milton, not even a week and a half later, I think, came in and impacted his very neighborhood again. So I'll just play the clip.
Ever recall a hurricane season
No.
where you've
No,
I just dealt with this a week ago?
Yeah, I'm 6th generation Floridian. My wife, both of us are, and we don't want to live here anymore now. Like I just can't even take the stress of this over and over and over and over again. I mean, we got hammered by, what was that storm called?
Ian. I was here last year.
Yeah, we got
2 years ago,
hammered
sorry.
by Ian. Probably had like $150,000 worth of damage. We're still battling the insurance company over 2 years later. Then we get 2 more back-to-back storms, and now they're talking about another storm coming in like a week. And it's like I don't even know if I can take it anymore. Honestly,
I understand.
Yeah.
And you were saying to me out in the driveway, Brock, that like the house next door to you, you already actually emptied out the entire house because of Helene.
Yep, last week. Yep.
And another few homes on this street have also been completely
All
emptied.
of them,
They're deemed destroyed.
So like what was crazy is a really eerie feeling before this storm came.
I'll just stop it there, but I mean, it's heartbreaking. And then we could talk about the insurance companies just backing out and not even offering coverage to a lot of these people. So it's the most vulnerable that are feeling the effects of climate change, and it's a lose-lose situation in many ways. And what I found, that man that I spoke to there had a really open perspective when it came to climate change, and he talked about he's seen I think he said he was 3rd generation Floridian. He'd been there forever, his whole life, and parents, and he's never seen anything like this. But there are other people that I've spoken to on that particular trip that maybe didn't really believe in climate change, or maybe politically were differently placed and didn't really want to attribute this to climate change. But it was kind of a breakthrough moment for me, because I'm there to do a job and tell a story and get an interview with people. And if I hammer them with the whys and the data and the stats, and I'm going to lose them. I'm not going to even get a conversation to happen. So I found that just speaking to people on a more, I guess, authentic, genuine level, and just talking about what we're seeing, whether it's a wildfire, whether it's a heat event, or whether in this case it's a hurricane, just hear them out and don't try to convince them of anything, because at the end of the day, whatever words we're using or not using, you'll likely see here we were completely on the same page. We know things are changing. That's the elephant in the room. We don't need to call it climate change. People know, they feel it. And that's that sort of felt evidence. Basically higher anxiety, more recovery stacked on top of recovery. Most of this I've hit on, but I think it's more important to talk about preventative and, mitigation, future mitigation. What can we talk about as citizens or as people without having to use those words or without having to talk about the fossil fuel industry, because a lot of people will tune you out, and I've learned that. That's just what's working for me. So let me go to this interview, and you'll see what I mean.
So Bob says he's kind of half Canadian because he's from Michigan. So I grew up on the Detroit border, and you know snow, you know winter weather, and now being here 10 years, you certainly know tropical weather. I mean, Bob, what's your opinion on all this? Is this normal? Are we seeing normal kind of?
This is not normal.
No.
This is not normal. This park has been here over 100 years.
Really?
1920, when I guess they first opened it up. They got some pictures. They had some pictures in the office of how it was. That used to be a store down there.
The yellow building?
That little yellow building, which is now the library, which now they lost all the books.
Oh.
They lost every single book in there that had been in there for
100 years.
100 years.
Wow.
For a long time. So
you were just here with Helene just weeks ago. When you say this is not normal.
I came down here to check on my, see what had happened with Helene, and it was a lot worse. It was a lot worse than this one.
In terms of the water.
Can you see?
I can see the water line.
You see how the water line was up?
I sure can.
Yeah,
He's talking about right there. Yeah.
So we're about.
Yeah, well, at least a 4 or 5
4
foot.
feet.
Yeah.
About 4 feet.
Surge.
This one came in about here.
Okay, so surge was less, but the wind was worse.
I think the wind was blowing different than in Helene.
It's very possible.
It blew out instead of blowing in.
It was more of a land to the ocean.
Right.
Yes, offshore wind.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of, like I said, instead of blowing in, it blew it out.
That makes sense.
So, but I don't know how in the world we got all this mud. It's from the soil.
Sure.
It's from the soil, but
combination of maybe rain and wind, maybe not so much surge and some surge.
I had such a weird, it was a weird experience too. My doctor's friend.
Just gonna
fashion first.
I'm just gonna fast forward this a little bit.
Don't. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like she actually.
And I got to really know a lot of November.
I think, Bob, that in a place like this, are you tired of the storms? Are you tired of the risk? Are you okay seeing that this time you fared out okay?
Well, I'm seriously considering, boy, if this keeps on, it's not going to be good. But I'm thinking, where else can I go?
Right.
Where else could I go? I bought this trailer for $5,000.
What?
$5,000.
Wow.
They just bought that last year. No. At least I got a. But not now.
Put it in I'm going to throw it out there. When you hear the words climate change.
Oh, sorry. That's the part I'm looking for. Oh,
so Bob.
No.
For a little while. North or more south.
There we go.
It's just a little. Depends on that El Nino.
I'm so sorry, everyone. There we go.
To me, it seems it's just a cycle.
I asked him about climate change.
In it, out, not. What do you make of it?
No. To me, it seems it's just a cycle that we go through. The Earth has done this forever, or whatever, as long as can be. So I just think we're going through a cycle, and it's probably going to stay with us for a little while, And it depends on that El Nino and El Nina, too.
So I'm going to stop the clip there. The reason I wanted to show that is, let me see if I can move on to the next there, is that, and I'm sorry, I thought that edit was a little bit shorter there. The concept of, he's almost lost everything, multiple storms, and yet he still will not say that this is linked to climate change. We all know it is because we are here for a reason, but the fact that we could still agree and have conversation that something is changing and that even he is tired of the risk and maybe doesn't have insurance was a breakthrough moment for me as a communicator. And so I'm going to just sort of end with this slide in that it's important to communicate to build public trust in a way that people can understand. If we're saying too much, people are going to tune us out. This is my experience. Saying less, don't get into the climate debate, say more about risk and safety and preparation and community and, trust. Connect with people with what they do see. When you're at the local grocery store and you're talking about the upcoming wildfire season, when communicating climate change, I'm not going to dig into the stats, but there's ways of sort of peppering it in and that we're all on the same page, even if we don't want to say those words. That's been what's been helpful for me. So the win is not getting someone to repeat the phrase. The win is getting them to prepare, to vote, most importantly, plan, and protect each other. So that's all I have today for my presentation. Thank you for staying with me, and sorry about that weird edit, but I really appreciate you listening, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Should I stop sharing at this point, ladies?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Jaclyn, I've been looking at questions and I'll just summarize them.
Okay.
And then maybe if we have time, we can go to some live questions.
Sure.
Now you've moved to British Columbia, which are one of our main things. Of course, we do have floods, but fire is on everybody's mind. Have you been reporting at all about the weather that wildfires can create themselves, the so-called fire weather? Do you have any
Right.
reflections on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's fire nados and things like that, and yes, it can actually create its own weather. I don't talk a lot about that because, well, it takes a very, very powerful and large wildfire to start creating its own weather. Not necessarily my expertise, although I find it very fascinating. I think there was a fire NATO actually in the McDougall Creek fire. But I think when talking about wildfire here in the Okanagan, it becomes, yeah, for me personally, like something that you're planning for. Like when I have people flying out here in the summer, I'm like, oh, well, probably should avoid these weeks in August, or maybe September could be smoky too. And it's like we're at a time where we're actually having to think like that. I always say to my parents who are still back in Ontario, we don't get a lot of rainy days. We don't get a lot of crappy days in general. We don't get strong winds and big storms like the Great Lakes do. But what we do get is fires. And when we get them, it can be a nuisance. So I hope that answers that question. But I don't typically talk a lot about fire, generating its own weather, but it can, and of course, lightning, and it can be cyclical and quite scary.
Sue Tucker has asked, what climate misinformation do you hear most frequently, and what answers do you give? And you've kind of answered it in a way already, talking about how you're really trying to connect to people's real life situation, to hear
Right.
them, and to maybe get them to reflect on how they can make themselves safe and prepare. But do you have any other thoughts on when you meet that resistance and misinformation?
Sure, I do. Great question, Sue. If I had a nickel, well, maybe I more like a loony nowadays. If I had a loony for every time someone would say things like, "Well, so much for climate change. We had such a horrible winter this winter in Ontario. Oh, forget about it." And not making that connection that climate change is about extremes, right? Climate change is about, like I said, these stalled jet stream patterns where we see, yeah, you might be getting pleasant weather in one part of the world. Maybe even it's like bonus, especially for us Canadians. We'll get a blast of heat and we think we've died and gone to heaven because we're Canadian. We like heat. We look forward to summer. But while we're getting that, like a big ridge of high pressure and a lot of heat, maybe another part of the world is getting a stalled pattern that's bringing them flooding, or something else, or extreme cold. And it's about how does that impact people? So, heat might sound good to us Canadians. I say it in kind of a joking way, but heat is difficult for a lot of people to live in, and it impacts everything we do, and people that work outside for a living. And so when we saw those heating degree days and how they are going to be increasing, imagine having 80 days a year with over 30 degrees. It'd be like living in Palm Springs. It'd be very different climate for us folks in the Okanagan. And sadly, that could be on track.
We've heard some information about defunding a lot of the funding for NOAA and science and U.S. Weather systems. Are you starting to see the impact of those scientists just not working for the government anymore? And do you feel it's going to have a long-term impact, or might we see it all go away in 3 years?
Yeah, let's hope we do see it all go away in 3 years. But yeah, it has been definitely, it's been just stripped of all their resources. And I do have friends that are National Weather Service meteorologists that I'm sure have been impacted. But I haven't really seen an impact so far. But my big fear is when hurricane season comes. That's when, it's one thing to forecast a tornadic storm or something kind of localized, definitely can do a lot of damage, don't get me wrong, but it's what we call kind of a mesoscale weather event, small scale, and maybe a town or sadly a city could be impacted. But when we think about a hurricane moving into the southeast US or Canada, but we're not dealing with the defunding, but let's say a storm's moving into the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, these are massive storms that impact millions and millions of people. That's when I'm most concerned about those layoffs with NOAA. Because I think that's when it's really going to rear its ugly face. Luckily, we're in an El Nino pattern, so we're expecting a quieter hurricane season. But next year could be different, and as long as that's still the same, yeah, we're going to be in big trouble. But as far as like right now, May in Tornado Alley is normally I would be chasing storms in May. This year I'm not. That's where all the active weather is right now is in the Central Plains, and I'm sure because of the cutbacks that there, maybe there's one warning that goes out too late after a tornado has done damage somewhere. These are the things we're going to see. But I think with a hurricane, that's not going to be good.
Jennifer is asking about how you get people to connect the dots between their behavior and choices to what they're experiencing. Do you have any reflections on that?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And I recently took, I'll be very honest with you, I'm new to the climate movement, right? I'm a meteorologist and a storm chaser and a communicator. And so it's been about 5 years that I've really learned everything I can. And I recently completed a sustainability professional certification in sustainability with MIT. And it was really heavy and I learned a lot. But, we learned about sustainability, how can we learn to respect our natural resources and our natural capital on Earth? And I think that the answer to that is that you get people fire smarting their home, and that includes me, who hasn't done everything perfect. You get people to connect to what can I do to make things a little easier this in our case this wildfire season. Build community with neighbors. We have a great WhatsApp group on my street because of the White Rock Lake fire. We have this great WhatsApp group where we inform everyone. If anything, if someone's out of town and you've got eyes on the forest, we're in the wildland urban interface where I live. And so, connecting the dots by having good conversation with people. And I mean, it's a loaded question. There's so many things that we can all do better, whether that's water conservation or fire smarting our home or, yeah, I mean, lots of things. But I guess just having honest dialogue and being authentic and maybe not judging. Because I find that whenever it's all doom and gloom or there's judgment, people just tune me out. That's been my experience.
Well, this has been fantastic to hear about your work. It's kind of exciting, obviously, but I'm even more grateful for what you're showing us in terms of having good conversations and connecting. Because I think all of us, even though we're not doing the exciting work that you are, we are trying to have those conversations in the community, and that's what Deep Dive is part of. So I really appreciate those two perspectives that you've brought into your talk this evening. So thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for
On
having me.
behalf of everyone, and I'm going to pass things over to Sue.
Thanks for having me. That was a lot of fun, and the work that you guys are doing is very commendable. This is the 49th, did you say, Lori?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jaclyn, and hopefully we'll stay connected with you now. We know you
Please.
live just up the lake.
Absolutely, yes.
I'm just going to quickly make a couple of announcements, and these first ones are for people in and around Penticton. Next Tuesday, May 26th, we'll be having our Views and Tales Club meeting, and we'll be talking about or discussing Elizabeth Kolbert's book, Life on a Little Known Planet, Dispatches from a Changing World. So if you're interested, you can email us and come to that if you like. On June 9th, Seniors for Climate is holding an event during Seniors Week. There'll be a climate cafe at the Penticton Rec Center. And the other local event is we are planning a toxic trivia pizza party later in June. So stay tuned for more information about that. There's also a very important BC province-wide tour of the new Forest Act. This is a legislative proposal to replace British Columbia's current forestry system. They will be coming to Penticton on June the 6th, 3:30 at the Oasis Church, but the tour will also be in a number of other communities around BC. So look out in your local community to see if they're coming there, and we encourage you to attend that if you can. And the last item will be about our next deep dive, which will be our last one before the summer. On June 25th, we have Kevin Smith of Silva Char Environmental. He'll be talking about biochar, and he'll tell us how his company helps transform forestry residuals and wildfire fuels into high-value biochar products. So it sounds very interesting, and we hope you'll join us for that. And again, we will be sending out an email with links and a video recording of this discussion tonight. So unless there's anything else, Lori or Margaret, that will be it from us.
No, I think that's it. I can't think of anything else, but I want to thank Jaclyn so much and thank everyone else for coming tonight. It was really powerful and wonderful, and gave me lots to think about. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.